Okay, let's cut the countdown because we need to watch the game. Here we go. Are we ready?
We're ready.
I
Ready to
think so.
roll?
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to all our viewers and listeners. My name is MK Smith.
And I'm Bassam Haddad.
And with full disclosure, we are happy to be with you today and simultaneously watching the Morocco game.
Absolutely.
Right out of the corner of our eye. So if you
Yeah.
see our eyes drifting, that's all that's happening. Anyhow, we are both happy to be here for another episode of Live with ASI, a month of knowledge production. We're doing things a little, actually, no, we're not. We're not doing things a little differently today.
We will be doing things differently.
Eventually, we'll be doing things differently, but not today.
And the idea is to switch to a more conversational show where we're not as uptight and sitting in our chairs in a
Because
formal
uptight
setup.
is definitely how I would describe us all the time. Anyways, so
Okay.
formal professionalism, etc. Let's roll the intro.
All right, let's do the intro.
Today is a really special show as we will be centering important discussions on the recent COP27 conference in Egypt. What are the contradictions inherent in holding the conference in Egypt of Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, and which points of contention played out, and what are the implications of this conference? Stay tuned for some answers.
We will also discuss the World Cup 22 in Qatar and reflect on what we've seen so far and share predictions for the tournament moving forward. You don't want to miss that discussion, even though you'll also be able to catch the Real Football podcast, which will also address this matter. We also have a potential connection with Abdullah Al-Aryan, who is our, co-editor of the Critical Currents in Islam page, right out of Doha, right out of the stadium. Problem is that it looks like the game is going to go into overtime, so I'm not sure if he will be able to join us.
We'll also be having a critical discussion wherein we compete with one another to see who has the best pronunciation of Qatar.
Yeah,
Qatar,
Gutter,
guitar,
Qatar,
cater.
Cater. That's a new one.
In addition, we'll go over the brand new Flow podcast as well as the new Arab Studies Journal. We'll also discuss some new texts out now as well as some must-read recommendations. We will also feature exclusive interviews with Peyman Jafari, Adel Iskandar, Carly Krakow, Noura Erakat, and Tanya El Khouri. As always, all the material covered today can be found in the episode digest to be published in the coming days, so keep an eye out.
And one thing we will also talk a lot about today is Mesa. So I don't know how long we're going to be, but it looks like it's a packed day. So please sit back, relax, and let's get to it.
Last month, Bassem debuted a new podcast titled Flow, which aims to defy YouTube's algorithm by not focusing on just one thing to the exclusion of others. The show provides stimulating conversations stimulating conversations about our world with focus on the Middle East and United States, including a variety of topics related to politics, culture, art, technology, wellness, and film. In one episode, Bassam interviewed human rights defender and journalist Hussam
Bahgat.
Behket, thank you, on the politics of Alaa Abdel Fattah's imprisonment in Egypt, the global attention which the campaign to free Alaa has received.
In another episode, I interviewed Peyman Jafari, who is Assistant Professor of History and International Relations at the College of William and Mary, on the protests in Iran. We discussed why these protests are different from previous years, how the state is reacting, and what role international forces play in it. You're moving it.
Sorry.
Sorry, it's okay. And what role international forces play, how they compare to Iran's 1979 revolution and the Arab revolutions of 2011 and after, and where they might be heading. And we are just lucky to...
We are lucky to have Peyman here to share some insights from the conversation that he shared with Bassam. Welcome, Peyman.
Let me fix the output. This is like not where we want things to be. Okay,
There we go. Welcome, friend.
Sorry, Peyman, you were muted. It was from our side. Go ahead.
All right. Good seeing you.
Very good seeing you, Payman, again. And thank you for joining us for those couple of minutes. I know your schedule is very tight. Everyone's schedule is very tight at the end of the semester. We would love to just hear from you. What were some of the highlights of our conversation, and if there are any updates?
Right, I think it is important to underline the significance of these protests because and their resilience, right? Because there has been lots of repression. We are nearing 3 months of the protests; they are still continuing as we speak. Yesterday, the first day of a 3 day of protests was announced and has started. So there is an uptick in protests since yesterday, and that is being accompanied by strikes as well. Mainly shopkeepers in 40 cities in Iran have gone on strikes. By the way, so it is important to give some context about what these strikes are, because there are 340 cities in Iran having more than 20,000 inhabitants, and 40 of them have joined. So you see, it is a significant step, but it is still very uneven in terms of geographically and the different sectors joining the protests.
Thanks, Payman. And where might this be headed, given the constellation of factors that are right now at play? Is there a kind of a crescendo, or is there a slowing down of intensity?
Right, we talked a bit about the dynamics of the protest in our conversation in the flow episode. That this is going with ups and downs of the protests. That the youth is really the driving force of this. The universities are centers of organization, and also the Kurdish area. So those are the centers that are keeping the protests alive, and then it goes ups and down in the rest of the country. And if we look on this side of the state of how this is impacting them and what narratives they are developing and strategies they are developing, we see that basically they are continuing the repression, right? Four people have been sentenced to death by now, and the number of arrests have increased from 14,000 to 18,000. On the other hand, we do see that there are debates at the top. For instance, they have been kind of floating the idea of taking down the morality police. About that, there was lots of confusion in the media yesterday because one of the officials declared that they are abolishing the morality police. That's not the case. They have withdrawn it from the streets. We have to see what happens really to the morality police. But it is an important signal that they do want to give some concessions. How far those concessions will go, we don't know. Also, in 2 weeks, there will be a commission report of the parliament and the judiciary coming with a statement about the future of the compulsory hijab in Iran. So that is also, I think, they are floating ideas to see how their hardline supporters will react to this and how the streets will react to this.
Wonderful. Thank you. And so, if I may, I have another follow up question for you. I just
Sure.
returned from the World Cup, and a question that's on my mind, and I know is on the mind of a lot of people, regardless of how invested they are in Middle East politics, with the World Cup being front and center on the global stage right now. I think a lot of folks are curious about the Iranian football team's decision to refrain from singing Iran's national anthem, at least during that first game, and then seeming to have some sort of a reversion with regards to the second game. What can people, expect moving forward? What was the reaction of Iranians towards this act of protest, and what might come of these players who decided to withhold from singing?
Right. I think the World Cup really kind of represented the whole polarization that is developing around the Iran protests, also within the Iranian society and the diaspora Iranian society, of how the football team, the soccer team, should have been behaving there. So for some people, they were being portrayed as basically supporting the regime by kind of appearing, continuing, and some of them were writing letters to FIFA to exclude the Iranian team from the World Cup. Some people in the diaspora, while others were thinking, well, this team is under huge pressure, right? Because the regime were kind of threatening their families, they were exerting pressures on them. So what the team did, I think, is try to keep playing and moving forward to actually play a good match while siding with the protests. So what they did, symbolism, they did not sing along in the first session, and also in their interviews, they very much started by saying how much they are supporting the protests, that they are on the side of the protests, and so on. But obviously, it did not make everybody happy. It was really a contentious kind of game. I think they were very glad that they could actually return home and move out of the political spotlights.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That definitely gives us a lot to reflect on and think.
Yeah, and I wish we had a bit more time, but I promise you we'll just keep you for just a couple of minutes. Is there anything, Payman, you'd like to share with us as we look on to, well, sure, the World Cup, but Iran unfortunately is out. But as we look on to the region in this coming few months, is there anything that we should look out for? Is there anything you'd like to mention before we release you back into your freedom?
Right. Well, in regional terms, first of all, it is kind of curious that many countries are actually in the region silent about the Iran protests, like Saudi Arabia and others who have been often very vocal to kind of exploit moments of crisis in Iran. And I think it has a lot to do with their own vulnerability towards kind of popular protests, so that they do want to see a weaker Iran, but not necessarily on this front when it is about actually the social restrictions, which are in place in many of these countries as well. And the second important thing in regional terms is that I'm very much worried about other countries, particularly Israel, kind of trying to exploit this moment. There has been ideas of Israeli and American military conducting military exercises around Iran, kind of putting in place like games of bombing nuclear installations in Iran. And I think this is very, very dangerous in terms of uh, creating the mentality and the context of the acceptability of a future, maybe military confrontation, because I think that would actually very much undermine the gains of the popular movement now in Iran. So I hope that will not materialize.
Thank you so much, Payman, for joining us, and we look forward to having you back on the show, especially as protests continue in Iran. I'm sure, as always, you'll have some incredible insight for us as you did today. So thank you so much for joining us.
And we are due for coffee or lunch since you're in the vicinity of the Washington area.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes,
We will
I will
host
come
you
along.
in the studio next time.
Yes.
Great, sounds good. Thanks for
Great
having
to
me.
see you.
Salam.
Okay, bye.
Okay, now our next guest is Muin Rabbani, who we're going to bring on momentarily, who last month was busy putting on 4 new episodes of the Connections podcast, which makes the rest of us just look lazy. For those that don't know, Connections combines journalism, analysis, and scholarship to offer timely and informative interviews on current events and broader policy questions.
This looks really shady. I don't know. It looks like I'm reaching for something now. I was reaching for the button
Sure.
to change the.
Thank you. Connections combines journalism, analysis, and scholarship to offer timely and informative interviews on current events and broader policy questions, as well as themes relevant to knowledge production. The episodes this past month covered recent Israeli elections, the recent U.S. midterm elections, the legal campaign and torture in the U.S., and Elon Musk's brilliant tenure as Twitter executive. Can Muin, are you with us? Yeah, well, we're going to bring you in. Hello, friend.
Hi guys, how are you?
How are you?
Good to see you.
Trying to watch the game out of the corner of my eye.
We're
but
doing the
otherwise-
same
We're
thing
doing
right
the
now.
same thing, which is why some things are happening in this episode that never ever happened.
We have never had a technical glitch before in our lives. So
or we have never actually not paid 100% attention to
Always
exactly
fully
what's going on.
focused.
Always fully focused.
100% of the time.
100%.
Make it quick so I can go back to the
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Can
fine.
you share with us some of the general insights and highlights of these past 4 interviews that you've conducted?
game. Well, they were very different interviews, but I think what was interesting about them is that many of my guests saw kind of the current chaos and so on as in many ways a logical culmination of dynamics that have been active for multiple years. So, for example, on the Israeli elections, Mayrav Zonshine felt that the particularly radical makeup of the new Israeli parliament and incoming Israeli government didn't come out of nowhere, but had been years in the making with the ever increasingly rightward shift of Israeli politics and Israeli society and Israeli public opinion. Similarly, when I asked Rick Perlstein in the context of the US midterm elections if we've reached peak MAGA, he felt that perhaps Trump is no longer in the picture, perhaps, but that the agenda he represents has in many ways been is still very much alive. And of course, Perlstein has written seminal books on the development of the American right since the 1960s. So he very much knows what he's talking about. And also, Marwa Fatafta on Twitter related Elon Musk's chaotic tenure to the broader problems with the ownership structure of these public platforms by private interests and problems with content moderation and so on.
Thank you, Muin. We would like to see, given this is the end of the year, just if you can give us a quick recap of some of the important, I mean, all of them were important. I actually had the pleasure to be able to process, all of these podcasts. Could you give us like a quick look back at, since this is the last show of the year, a quick look back at what is it that has caught your eye in terms of the podcast that you've conducted?
Right. Well, thanks for asking that question. I think what was interesting this year is that our focus has still been very much on the Middle East, and I think we had some particularly interesting discussions, for example, on Sudan, on Palestine, on Yemen, which I believe was also in the past year, on North Africa, more recently on Egypt, but have also begun looking at broader issues, whether geographically or thematically. So we also looked at the war in Ukraine, as you just mentioned, looking at Twitter in a way that was not really directly related to the Middle East. We also looked at ongoing Azerbaijani aggression against Armenia, and and of course the U.S. midterms most recently. And I'm hoping to be able to maintain this expanded focus in the coming year.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been an incredible year of connections. I know I've learned a lot, and I'm sure
Thank
that
you.
your audience has as well. And it's a huge feat. I jokingly said your level of production makes us all look lazy, but in all seriousness, it is very
Well,
impressive, and it
I
is an
think
excellent resource.
Adelia's level of production overall is very impressive, and that certainly goes for your
And
program as well.
thanks, Moin. I have just a quick question. Who feeds you the ideas that you have?
I tend to get them during my sleep,
Mm.
and I kind of
Oh,
bolt
they are
upright
yours.
at
They are
two
your.
They're
thirty
not yours.
a.m. No, I mean, I know there are important issues that I haven't yet covered. Egypt being one of them. I'm now trying to arrange interviews on Iraq and Syria, which are two vital countries that I haven't yet covered. Other suggestions come from friends and contacts, and of course, if you remain abreast of the news, then there's always issues that recommend themselves. And in other cases, I'll be aware of, for example, a significant new publication. So Maya Mikdashi, for example, our co-editor at Jadaliya, who recently published her book Sextarianism is my next victim to talk about her book. The same went for our colleague Hisham Salam, his outstanding book, Classless Politics. So, comes from all over the place.
Thank you so much. I actually was, yeah, I was actually trying to be insulting and it didn't work, and because this is the game we play, so you gave me a
Well,
straight
that's
answer.
because
I think
I've
you
been
just want to go back to the game.
yes, I've been focused on that. So I was unfortunately impervious to the insult.
طيب شكرا معين. We will
Good to
see
see
you
you.
soon, and
Great to see you guys. See you
there's a
next year.
potential development where you will also be joining as a host of Live with ASI in the 2023 version. So have fun and enjoy the game.
Thank you. See you guys soon.
See
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye. So shall we go to
I
a
like that. Yeah.
yeah.
You gave everyone a little sneak peek of our WhatsApp messages, which was fun.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Little behind the scenes action. Okay, go to an interlude or something, please.
Okay, let me go to an interlude because there's a lot going on right now. All right.
Well, this past weekend, we had the pleasure of attending the Middle East Studies Association 56th annual meeting in Denver, Colorado. ASI had a strong showing at the conference, with our team members participating in 11 panels. Actually, I think it was more than that, closer to 13. We won't be able to go in depth, but here's a quick list of all of the different kind of panels that are.
And let's introduce them while we have with us Adil, who will also say something about Mesa as we.
Adil, who is my new best friend, who I met in person for the first time this past weekend, and now he knows everything about me, and I will soon know everything about him, and we're best friends, and I just wanted to let everyone know that. Okay. Hi, friend.
Hi.
Okay, that wasn't a ringing endorsement of what I just said, but thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to give us a rundown of all the different panels. First, Gender, Capitalism, Law, and Empire, a tribute to Judith Tucker, 20 years since Rule of Experts. What? Oh, hello. Thank you. Okay. We also had a panel on current paths in the study of technopolitics, a roundtable on sextarianism, another panel thinking on Iraq with climate change, another panel on strategies of authoritarian regimes, a roundtable on the flame within Iranian revolutionaries in the United States, a panel featuring many of the co-editors of our Maghreb page called the Maghreb Archiving Project, a separate panel titled Officers and Entertainment, Popular Culture in the State of Egypt, and I wish I had another word other than another, but another panel titled The Casual Consumption of the Middle East, the Region's Reconstruction and Entertainment, Reproducing of Rural Life, Critical Agrarian Perspectives of Labor in the MENA Area. Okay, those were two separate panels. It was not on consumption and reproduction. Anyhow, and finally, a panel on climate, water, and ecology.
We also had a reception and celebrated 30 years of ASI. It was a great, wonderful event, honestly, that made us all feel warm as the solidarity was overflowing, not just among the ASI team, but also among the visitors. We will be featuring so much of the goings on and pictures and some of the things that were shared in the next podcast next month, because this month is totally filled and we are just back from Mesa. So
we just got back yesterday.
We will
So we need a little bit of slack because we're a little tired and a little jet lagged. But you know what else we did on top of all the critical academic things? We danced.
We danced. There was
We
a lot
danced
of
a lot,
dancing,
which was great.
And we will share a lot of that soon.
Yes, and as Sam said, we have with us Jadalia co-editor Adil Iskander, who was present at Mesa, who is here to reflect on the experience with us.
Adil, you have a couple minutes to share your takes and observations before we bring in other guests.
Yes, thank you, Bassam. Thank you, MK. It was, well, first and foremost, it was a delight and a real pleasure to finally meet you, MK. And you are definitely my best friend. So thank you. In contention with Bassam, of course. So honestly, Mesa this year, I mean, I don't know how to reflect on it short of saying that even though it was a smaller iteration of the conference, it was immensely warm and intimate in many ways, in the sense that It felt like a lot of people had missed the camaraderie and solidarity that brings us together, not only through the research and the work that we do and the intellectual sort of convictions that we bring to bear, but also in terms of our personal connections. So that was a really sort of landmark aspect of Mesa this year. I think a lot of us had missed being in the presence of others, largely because of the pandemic and the virtual iterations of the conference in the past years, a couple of years or so. So that I think was really remarkable. The highlights for me, of course, there are too many things to share, but the highlights for me were, and I'm sorry, the game is literally in the final seconds. Thank you, Bassem. Thank you, MK, for doing this to me. If I speak through penalties, this is going to be a whole other realm. But I do want to say that there were some highlights for me. First of all, I think that the Iranian revolutionary movement loomed very large, and that's something that I think was very advantageous about how Mesa was able to very quickly pivot to render this an important event. So one of the take-home experiences for me was attending the Women Life Freedom panel that was organized, and the speakers were really phenomenal. In addition to that, also foregrounding the discussion around how how Middle East studies can teach us something about race, or how Middle East studies can learn a lot about discussions around race, which was the subject of the presidential panel, which was really very skillfully and very thoughtfully moderated by Mesa's president, which we're thrilled to have had preside over this particular convention. And then I think there were lots of other things that I really loved about it. That people were really sort of invested in the research that's being done. There are instances where it was a bit cheeky and a bit giddy, but I feel like fundamentally there was a lot of solidarity in the work that was being presented and how it was received. But really, the highlight for me was the outsized and timely contributions of graduate students to this conference. This was an opportunity to showcase stellar graduate research from across the world, and this is something that is, I'm not going to say it rarely happens, but there's a tendency for things to be lopsided in favor of tenured faculty of whom we respect and hold in great regard. But fundamentally, graduate students really stole the show this time with their inventive, avant-garde, cutting edge, empathetic, effectively informed research, and that to me kind of stole the show, so I absolutely loved it, and it spoke to the real transformations currently underway in Middle Eastern studies, both in North America and across the world, foregrounding indigeneity, foregrounding decolonial discourses, thinking about Palestine, and also working across disciplines in a manner that I hadn't seen before. So the fault lines seem to be falling, and the graduate students are to be thanked and really appreciated for doing so. So yeah, those are the take homes for me.
Thanks, Adil. We're going to show you a bit of the game as you are now with us, so you
As a
don't feel
treat.
as a treat. This is precisely what is going on right now in the game, and we hope that we can go back to the show. But we just had a quick.
It's really out of our hands at this
out of
point.
our hands at this point. There's going to be penalties.
Someone would score.
So MK and I decided that we are actually going to watch the penalties with our viewers as a treat for our for our viewers.
As if they couldn't be watching the game without
No,
watching
because
LWA.
not everybody has access
That's true,
to
true.
channels that actually show. Oh my
Oh.
God!
Oh,
Almost.
wow.
Did you see that?
Yeah. Ooh la la.
Wow. This is for
Actually,
real.
I don't know if this is live. You're a few
Yeah, we're a few seconds behind.
We are.
We're
Yeah.
actually flipping of the coin for penalties.
All right.
Yalla,
well,
yalla.
Okay, we can. All
Fast
right.
forward.
There we go. Is this better?
Much better. And
Okay.
can I just say that at ASI, what we do really well is kind of go against the grain, and there's nothing that gives me more pleasure than undermining the monopoly of mainstream media on the broadcasting of sports. So
Oh, is this illegal? Are we doing something illegal now?
100%.
Is it illegal?
It's kind of frowned
Is it
upon.
gray area? Is it
It's
gray
in
area or
yeah,
illegal? Because if it's illegal, we have to stop right after the penalties are taken.
yeah. I think it'll become illegal after the penalties are finished.
I think that they will appreciate that it's
No,
penalties
because-
and they'll say it's fine.
How about if I make the window smaller? Isn't there like
I
some
don't
sort
think
of
that matters.
here like this? No, that's not even.
That's
changing
bigger,
anything.
but that's fine.
Okay, Adil, thank you so much for this really wonderful rundown. You also gave a wonderful short speech at the ASI reception that everyone loved, even though you were just called in to do it last minute, and you still performed and actually empowered all of us with your wonderful takes. So. Now, I think we should. Would you like to stay with us to watch the game and to, speak with other guests while the penalties are taken? What are we doing? What's next?
Let's see what's next. What's next is Carly,
Carly,
who
okay.
we did promise we would keep on a timeline.
All right, but she did not call, so
Oh,
maybe she's watching.
I'll add her in the conversation. And Carly.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the meantime, let me say that it was a remarkable Mesa because everyone was very excited to be in public with other colleagues and to mingle, to network, to just say hi, how are you doing, and get to see people that we haven't seen in person for more than 2 years as a result of the pandemic. And we were able at the Arab Studies Institute to showcase a lot of our work, including a wonderful interview with one of the co-authors of a new book that we published at Tadween called Search for Power, that is co-written by Tanya Al-Khouli and our own Ziad Abu Rish, even though Tanya Al-Khouli is technically a member of the Status podcast. And what we will do right now is go to a quick version of this interview with Tanya. So feel free to hang with us, Adil, and we will share with you the interview that actually the answer that Tanya provided to the interview or to the question on the I'm just watching the screen.
He's
sorry.
signaling something to us, but I don't know what it is.
It's a wonderful work of art and work of intellectual production that Tanya Al-Khouli, the really wonderful and I must say famous artist, has produced along with the professor / historian Ziad Abu Rish. Here's the interview.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. The Search for Power is based on a lecture performance which I created in collaboration with Ziad Abu Rish on the history of electricity blackouts in Lebanon. The work follows our journey in 5 different countries in order to collect archival documents that will tell the story of why we have daily power cuts in Lebanon. The book shares the performance script both in spoken Arabic and in English. Also has some photos from the actual performance and from the journey, the research journey. Has a sample of the archival documents that we've collected in these 5 countries. It has an introduction text that I wrote and another one by Ziad on themes such as multidisciplinary research, that collaboration between an artist and a historian, about the inaccessibility of archival documents in Lebanon, working on state institution in Lebanon, but in Arabic-speaking world in general. The book is designed by Jana Trablsi in Beirut, and it's both in English and in Arabic.
Here we go. So we're gonna do a quick peek at the second penalty. Whoa!
Ooh!
Yes, we are partisan. We are very partisan.
If it wasn't clear, I think
Hi. Can you
Hi.
hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Hi,
Go
Nora.
Morocco!
Yes, absolutely. We were watching online. I think we were on mute the whole
Okay.
time.
Yeah, I don't
Let's-
think anybody's watching you guys right now because it's far
That's
more
totally fair.
significant. No,
We're totally fine. Were you able to hear what I said about the CBS interview?
I did not. I couldn't hear
Okay,
anything.
because I think
we're on mute.
this whole time we're on mute, so we can repeat
We just
that
enjoy the
segment.
sound of our own voices. So.
But at least the game was on screen, so people thought that we're actually
Yes.
just moving our
Focus,
lips.
just yeah.
Nora, we are now addressing briefly because we are in a very tight spot, and we know we contacted you sort of last minute. The second episode of the Transnational Times podcast that you conducted with Dr. CBS on her latest book, Organized Fight Win, which was a remarkable conversation that we got a lot of fantastic comments on. In the couple of minutes you have with us, can you tell us a little bit more about that conversation and the book, and maybe a little bit about your podcast?
Yeah, sure. So let me start by saying that Dr. Charlene Burden Stully is at Wayne State University. She's in Black Studies. She's one of, a one of the few Black radical political economists of our time who has been working on a number of texts and anthologies. Her own work on Red Scare, Black Scare, that looks at the entwinements of anti-Blackness and capitalism, or what some could sum up as racial capitalism. In this particular anthology, she lifts up, along with Professor Jody Dean, the work of and the legacy of Black communist women who are both organizers as well as intellectuals and academics across a time span between 1919, following the First World War, to 1956. The work is organized chronologically. Each of the temporal eras is preceded with an introduction by Jody and Charisse, and so I was lucky to have her on the Transnational Times podcast, which is, as you may know, concerned with lifting up the labor of radical academics and activists that are seeking to create a better world possible in a way that transcends our domestic borders, understanding full well that the struggles that we face are not limited to the domestic, but are in fact, transnational in scope, as colonialism and imperialism, globalization, neoliberalism all demonstrate for us. And so the task at hand is to be able also to respond with a commensurate analysis that's able to tackle those conditions. And so I couldn't be happier than this second episode. We were delayed. That we launched with bringing on Professor Dara Lee on his excellent work, Universal Enemies, and then we're basically, what happened right afterwards was the Unity Intifada, and a lot of time lapse. So we are restarting the podcast with Dr. CBS, and it could not have been more on point. It's quite instructive. There's also a critique of Black studies, as well as about what are we talking about when we talk about the entwinements of feminism, patriarchy, anti-Blackness and capitalism. One of the things she corrected me on in the interview was my, framing of that analysis as, maybe the predecessor to intersectionality. And she was, this was a very instructive moment when Dr. CBS says, no, this is not about intersectionality, because we have to think about what is the political project, and these are two completely different political projects. So even though it's looking at multiple axes of marginalization, it's doing different work than intersectionality would do for us, as opposed to what Black communist women are urging us to do in this moment.
Sorry, we had ourselves muted. Thank you so much, Noura. And can you tell us a little bit, based on your conversation, what kind of conclusions the two of you may have reached with regards to the implications for radical studies of the Middle East and Arab world that this text may have had?
We actually didn't touch on that.
Okay,
So,
next time. Clearly, I need to catch up.
One, we didn't touch on that. There were moments when that could have been brought up. I decided not to ask those questions, but instead to keep us, more focused on what Dr. CBS is lifting up. I think it's really good for us. It's really what happens when we study racial capitalism. How does that change our analysis of race and how we tackle race, and how does that change our analysis of identity politics as opposed to reductionist politics, which was another instructive moment, not to collapse those two themes.
Thank you so much. Clearly, I have some viewing to catch up on.
You'll
anyhow,
enjoy it, MK. You'll enjoy
I will.
It'll be worthwhile.
I will. I'm excited. I'll keep you posted. And just finally, Noura, if you could tell us a little bit about what is in store for the future of the podcast, if you have any ideas of some upcoming guests or some themes that you might want to touch on.
I think I'm going to continue down this theme. Internationalism is a big one, and Black internationalists have been really instructive, both in what they've shown us historically, right? It's being able to understand our condition even within a place that, where settler colonialism has more or less been normalized, to be able to continue to understand the US as a white settler colony and an imperial power. And being that it is global empire, it's a great point of departure as it, shatters American exceptionalism and empowers us to be better agents of change moving forward. So in that vein and in that spirit, the next guest will likely be Dr. Judy Peterson Smith, who is the Michael Ratner Fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies. He received his PhD in the study of U.S. militarism at Tufts University and is currently working on a number of campaigns, including, the problematique of why the left hasn't properly been able to understand and lift up a, rebellion in Iran. And his longstanding work on the anti-war movement in the United States and where Palestine fits in this broader picture. So look forward to that.
Thank you, Noura. And do you want to tell people, what happened to us and to you, and how you're now living in your car?
Not really.
Okay, we'll talk about it another time. Can you please share with us? There was a wonderful piece of news that just came out today that I'm sure you know about. You were the recipient of a very prestigious award that was just announced today, and we will be sharing this publicly. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Me. This was not supposed to be part of the interview.
I know, but it's such a big piece of news. Can you share with us? Because we're probably gonna play the video anyway. Yeah.
Well, make sure I'm off when you do that. I am the third generation of Freedom Scholars, class of 2022, so to speak, identified as such by the Marguerite Casey Foundation, who are lifting up radical scholars primarily in the U.S. Academy. And I am sharing this honor along with a number of amazing radical scholars, including Ruth Wilson Gilmore, Miriam Kaba, Derica Purnell, Dean Spade, Jared Ball, and many others, Beth Ritchie. And so, to place, I think for us, this is a collective win for us, because it's indicating the further de-exceptionalization of Palestine, that it rightly fits right within the cohort of abolitionists and critical theorists, and isn't somehow exceptionalized and put on the side where it doesn't fit as part of a radical framework and a move forward. So yes, I'm very happy to receive this, very floored and honored, and a bit embarrassed that you're lifting it up, but thank you.
Congratulations. That is amazing.
Absolutely, Noura, and we will play the very quick video they just released. I just got a hold of it today, but I assume that you said you want to go, so you're not embarrassed.
I'm definitely going to get off before you do all that. So
all
from
right.
my car.
Can you show us around your car a little bit?
It's really clean.
All right.
It's really
That's awesome. Yeah.
Beautiful.
No. Stop. Okay.
See you, Noura.
Take care, Noura. Thank you so much for joining us on short
Assalamu
notice.
alaikum
And
وتحيا
we look
المغرب.
forward.
Okay, يلا.
Alaikum salam. Go Viva Morocco. Bye.
Bye bye.
Here's the video. And I don't know. Okay, there we go.
My name is
This
Nuda
is-
Eric.
There we go.
That we know we have been given permission by somebody to know, right? And so if we do not pursue alternative ideas, anti-hegemonic ideas, ideas that have been buried, if we don't lift up histories that don't exist, right? Histories of the defeated and the conquered, right? Other epistemologies, other forms of life, other forms of faith, right? And engagement with the world, then we are merely reproducing power over and over and over again. So I think that the pursuit, not of merely ideas, but really of knowledge, right? And the creation of new knowledge is necessary in order for us to be able to have the courage and the vision to create new futures. My name is Nuda Ericat, and I'm a freedom scholar.
Wonderful. Yeah. Very happy. Everybody's very happy
Oh,
for
Noura.
Noura for her incessant work. Okay, there was
Did you say incessant work?
incessant. Not
Incessant and impressive. I'm gonna throw in another word, a little
Impre-
alliteration.
absolutely. That's the award. Did you think I said another word?
No,
Okay, thanks. I'm trying to make sure. I make sure I didn't pronounce it wrong.
no, I just wasn't sure if I heard you.
We are very excited right now to bring in Kylie.
Nope, Carly.
Carly.
Close.
Kylie. It's like Muhammad and Mehmet.
Sure. Okay. Anyhow, last month, Egypt hosted the 27th Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. That is such a long title. Or COP27 for short. According to their website, this
This is our best episode yet of the year.
According to their website, this conference is a, quote, golden opportunity for all stakeholders to rise to the occasion and tackle effectively the global challenge of climate change facilitated by Egypt on the African continent, end quote. Carly Krakow, who is the managing editor for Special Projects and Environment Page co-editor at Jadaliyya, attended this conference in all its contradictions and glory. And in a moment, we will have her on to share some of her key takeaways. Carly, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I apologize. I know you had some difficulty initially logging in, so thank you so much for sticking with it.
And thank you for accommodating the change in the actual show's time, because we knew that nobody was going to watch, thinking that we will be able to start at 12 and be, done with the game, but it wasn't. So we still had that same issue. Thank you anyway for joining.
Yeah. No. Thanks for covering this and for having me on. It's been a while, and I know the logistics were more tricky than COP27, which is saying a lot. So I was like, I'm glad to join. And I want to say on behalf of all Carlys and Kylies in the world, it is not the same as Muhammad and Muhammad. That is my point on another issue. But great. So should I just jump right in?
Muhammad and Mehmet.
Okay.
No, I didn't.
All right.
No, I was. This is also a jab, because I'm always annoyed by how the Turks take the Arabic language and just, I don't know what they do with it.
We'll save that conversation for another day.
شهد لا هلا we're gonna... Okay, sorry, go ahead.
I have lost
Come
your
out.
sound
Go back.
again.
No.
But okay.
Oh, sorry, we were muted. First question that we have listed here for you, and it's an incredible one, is did this conference solve climate change? Yes or no?
Okay, well, yes, and I am pleased to report it did. I'd like to think it's because I was there in Sharm el Sheikh, so basically you are welcome. Not much
you.
stuff, and we can cut the segment short. No, but in all seriousness, a lot of information discussed some very high-stakes issues. So again, yeah, glad you guys are covering this, and I'll just go over a few different levels, I guess, that COP operates at. And I'll comment just briefly on each. I will tell you what those are before going into slightly more detail. So first, there are, of course, the climate negotiations themselves, the main event, the original purpose for COP, especially this year, the issue of loss and damage, which I'll comment on. Second, there's COP sort of as an experience, as an event with many smaller events unfolding over a couple of weeks for many different communities involved with various aspects of the
What
climate
do you think about
crisis,
that? Playing
involving
it so we don't
NGOs,
hear.
IGOs, academics, activists, and communities directly affected in various ways by climate issues, as well as businesses. So this includes a wide array of side events, pavilions, booths, meetings, and actions. Uh, Activism and actions were somewhat restricted this year, and that brings us to third, the national context of the host country. This is obviously always important, but had a defining role this year with Egypt holding the presidency. This created a lot of tension between, on the one hand, President El Sisi's government really seeing this as a chance for Egypt to be in a hopefully positive international spotlight and showcase commitment to the environment as a defining issue of our time, and on the other hand, the very dire, urgent situation regarding human rights in various forms in Egypt today, specifically, of course, the rights of political prisoners and the ongoing imprisonment of Allah Abd al Fattah, whose situation was extremely dire in the midst of COP as he went on hunger strike, and his family could not get any information about his condition as he stopped drinking water, and it was not clear how he was physically doing and what the status was. So I'll actually work sort of backward and begin with this last crucial point. In terms of outcomes, I suppose the main one is quite obvious in that Allah and many other political prisoners remain imprisoned, and while COP did bring a lot of international attention to their plight, it of course did not by any means solve the situation. And I think Hossam Bagat, who is at COP and who I know Bassam also had on for an interview recently, said it really well when he commented on the argument that had been circulating amongst human rights organizations and activists that perhaps should COP be protested altogether, or what should the response be given the regime's abuses? Should Egypt not be allowed to host, or should we at least express that view? And he said, frankly, that once the decision was made that it would be held in Egypt, he felt, and other activists felt, that they needed the platform desperately. They've been doing this work for decades, and this was a chance to hopefully bring some awareness. So don't do that and just reject this event altogether. Let's respond to COP in Egypt by highlighting the reality of the situation in Egypt. Sanaa, Allah's sister, was also at several events and press briefings that people may have seen in Sharm el-Sheikh, and this was during a time of, frankly, clear agony as her brother, again, was on hunger strike and stopped drinking water. And I suppose one silver lining or positive effect was to see how eager activists were, even if they were more strictly environmental activists. People were really eager for news about the situation, wanted these events, and it was very positive that she was able to speak in the official COP venue despite efforts to restrict such events. There's a lot more to say about that, so certainly we can return to it at another time, but I just wanted to note what it may mean for COP going forward. There is much needed recognition that human rights and environmental justice go hand in hand. There's no separating them. So we definitely saw recognition that there can't be climate justice without social justice. But I'm excited about how that binary in and of itself is even being dismantled further. That is part of what my own academic research looks at. So I'm interested in how the same forces, whether governmental regimes or corporations, repress communities both through environmental injustice and other forms of human rights abuses. So if a government or a company thinks a community is expendable, that could take the form of dumping toxic waste on them or restricting access to their water, or it can take other forms such as violence against people seeking refuge across international borders and violence against migrant workers, and many other examples where there are these overlaps. So COP28 will be in Dubai. I expect the lead up to that will involve human rights organizations and activists seeking to hold the UAE to account, drawing on all that was learned. Moving on just to the last 2 points on the climate negotiations, the big issue of the 2 weeks was loss and damage. To give some very quick basic background, action to address the loss and damage that will be experienced due to the effects of climate change is something that especially developing states have been seeking for decades. And this is essentially funding for irreversible loss or potentially repairable damage suffered by nations due to catastrophic events like hurricanes or droughts, or slower violence, such as sea level rise. And very important here is recognition also of the catastrophic loss of culture and languages, other non-economic losses that communities are already suffering. So of course we're talking about infrastructure and people's homes, but also about these other forms of loss and how do we address that. So in addition to climate mitigation and adaptation, acknowledging loss and damage has been a critical effort, and I would say in that sense this is a win. So then we have to ask in terms of what's next. Will countries actually pay up? Major emitters like the US and EU countries have long feared that this will make them vulnerable to be liable to pay massive amounts of compensation and to combat waves of litigation. Movement on the matter of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is seen as the specific limit needed to prevent catastrophic climate damage, led to a lot of disappointment about not enough commitment and not enough progress. Also, lack of concrete progress on phasing out fossil fuels. So, loss and damage, progress, definitely again a win, but elsewhere a lot of frustration and business as usual. And of course, always the issue of greenwashing, which has been the norm for a while, both at country levels in terms of pavilions, which are kind of like very large fair booths and event spaces, and which countries have the biggest physical presence and therefore often the loudest voice, and also with sponsors like Coca-Cola. Last but definitely not least, a lot of progress, I would say, for the environmental justice movement outside the formal negotiations at COP as well. There was the launch of the first ever Climate Justice Pavilion hosted by environmental justice leaders from the US, such as Robert Bullard, Beverly Wright, and Peggy Shepard. These are scholars and activists who did unprecedented work really beginning in the 1980s to create environmental justice as we know it as a movement today, and to center racial justice in that movement by definition from day one. So personally meeting with them and seeing how their work was integrated more than ever before into COP was a highlight for me, because a lot of the events in an unprecedented space like that, having a climate justice pavilion, I think will help build pressure in the year to come for environmental justice issues to be increasingly featured in official negotiations. And there was also increased emphasis on issues like disability justice, and I think we need much, much more of that at COP28 to push governments to recognize that the threats facing vulnerable communities must be addressed and are the same threats that affect us all. So more to come, but that's kind of a rundown of some of what stood out most prominently this year at COP27.
Thank you, Carly. It's invaluable having you here, seeing as you were at the conference and also an environment expert. So thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate it. As always, we look forward to having you back soon.
Yes, because we loved, sorry to cut you off, but we loved having your segment in the first season and a half, I think.
The catch-up.
The catch-up. That was really awesome, and it added a lot of flavor. So I know that you have like bigger fish to fry right now.
It's called a PhD.
It's
she
called
has to finish it.
But as soon as you finish that thing that's like hovering,
What a burden.
just teeny weeny thing.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I love joining you. And I know it's been a while. It's been a busy year. So great to be back. And again, happy you are highlighting this and that I could share some of the chaos that unfolded on the ground there. So wonderful to see you always.
Thanks,
Thank you, Carly. Do you just call her Carly again?
Carly.
Thanks, Carly. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Mehmet. شكرا حبيبتي. Salam.
As you all know, the editors of the Arab Studies Journal are proud to present
Shall we just be honest right now and keep this in the final video?
Yeah, we'll keep it in the final video. Here's what happened. Remember when Bassam said, I don't think this is illegal? And I looked in the camera.
I didn't say I don't think. I said, is it illegal?
And I looked in the camera and I went, and you said, I think it's a gray area. And I said,
no, I asked if it's a gray area. I said, is it a gray area or is it illegal? And it turns out it's illegal.
So the stream stopped 40 minutes ago. We've just been recording for ourselves because we've been blocked because we were illegally
Facebook
streaming.
And YouTube, which is very consistent. That I appreciated that actually.
So anyhow, it's just an audience of Bassam and I right now, which is probably good. Anyhow, last episode we talked about how the latest issue of the Arab Studies Journal was going to be released. Now it has been. The editors are proud to present the Fall 22 issue, which is now available. The issue consists of a collection of articles, essays, and reviews that provide new perspectives on vital questions of capitalism, nationalism, and the environment. The issue also features the Arab Studies Journal's second essay section titled Critical Environmental Perspectives in Middle East Studies, which explores how climate and environmental crises shape these conditions of possibility for research and analysis on and in the Middle East and North Africa. As always, the issue concludes with an insightful and robust reviews section. The works under the reviews explore critical works on empire, disability, and modernity, representing the breadth of contemporary studies of a dynamically changing region. The issue can be purchased at tidweenpublishing.com, and you can subscribe there as well for all future issues. And also, if you have access to things like JSTOR or a university library, you can access the issue that way, which is, again, the 30th anniversary issue, which is hugely exciting. Moving on to pedagogy.
It was a busy month for the Middle East Pedagogy Initiative, Middle East Studies Pedagogy Initiative. We put out the final 2 installments of the 6 part. I think you're referring to me.
I'm doing my Vera, whatever her name is.
They put out the final. Technically,
no one's watching. There's nothing to lose right now.
Nobody's
Literally
watching
nothing to lose.
live, but this will ultimately be published, so people will be watching.
Just keep talking. It's okay.
It was a busy month at the Middle East Studies Pedagogy Initiative. We put out the final 2 installments of the 6-part Arab Uprising series in peer-reviewed articles. And that series presents peer-reviewed articles concerned with the Arab uprisings published in 2010 to 2020 from our peer-reviewed articles database, courtesy of the coordinator and leader of that database, Shakila Omar. The first of the final 2 installments covers geopolitical implications and foreign interests, and the final installment covers regional international networks and systems. MESP also published a new installment of the Engaging Books series. For those that don't know, Engaging Books is a monthly series featuring new and forthcoming books in Middle East studies from publishers around the world. Each installment highlights a trending topic in MENA publishing, in the MENA publishing world, and includes excerpts from the selected volumes. This installment involves a selection of fiction from Archipelago Books. Other publishers' books will follow on a monthly basis. Before we continue, we have a call from Abdullah, who's at the site in Qatar. We'll speak with him because his battery is running low, and then we will resume in just a minute. And I understand that Abdullah might or might not be able to show video. Here we go. Assalamu alaikum, Abdullah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yay!
What's the vibe? Give us the lowdown.
Morocco just beat Spain.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, the atmosphere really all night from before kickoff was amazing. I mean, you saw it in terms of just the sheer numbers. It was almost overwhelmingly a Morocco crowd. And they never stopped cheering and chanting and singing throughout. And there was just such a sense of confidence and belief throughout. And I think we saw it in the performance. So and of course now it's just sheer euphoria. Everybody's celebrating.
How did it feel, Abdullah, to be in that space?
It's incredible. I mean, it's been incredible all tournament long. I think especially for those watching the matches representing teams of this region. Every one of them has felt like a home match. We've seen it, I think, with Tunisia against France, with even Iran, USA, with some of the other matches, with Senegal, Ghana. I mean, there's been such an incredible atmosphere all throughout that I think is in some ways, speaking to just how unique and interesting this particular tournament has been.
That's wonderful. And was there a sense that Morocco won because of the crowd, or is there also a sense that they really put up a good fight, not just now, but throughout the entire tournament? Did you feel that, or do you think, given that you are part of the Real Football group that we have and podcast, do you feel that this will be brought up as a factor or as the factor, the question of home field advantage, so to speak, which actually speaks to Arab nationalism in a roundabout way?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in terms of seeing the cross-border kind of solidarities that we've seen has been one of the most interesting things. Seeing diaspora communities adopting each other's shirts and flags, just even on a 2 or 3 hour basis, sometimes has been really something to witness. I mean, everybody was supporting Saudi for a day after. So it's been something I never would have expected going into this. So there's really something to that atmosphere that I think is incredibly unique. I mean, again, to be on the safe side, so much of this is still so fresh that I think we're all going to need time to process everything that we're seeing kind of unfolding in the last couple of weeks. But obviously, the Moroccan team was probably considered the most talented by far of all of the teams representing, Middle East, North Africa regions. Um, and so I think, but at the same time, of course, the crowds have really carried them quite far. And you see it in terms of the engagement with the crowds that we've seen from day one. We've seen it also in terms of just their ability to be really calm under pressure against some of the really powerful sides in the world. Belgium, Denmark, looking, of course, tonight at Spain. So there's been that. The fact that they haven't conceded a single goal, but beyond the one own goal early in the group stage, I think speaks to a certain kind of maturity and calmness with which they played.
Which prevents a lot of the commentators, because we have seen, you and I and others, and your article in the New York Times, as well as a lot of our commentary, has seen some sort of snide remarks about the home field advantage, as though there isn't a lot of talent backing that up, including the actual statistics that Morocco is probably the only team in the entire World Cup that has not conceded one goal from the opposition, besides the penalties, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's definitely been borne out throughout this tournament, is seeing teams that have come in already with a certain kind of pedigree. I think what was interesting tonight, for instance, at least three of the Moroccan players know the Spain team very well. They play in that league. They've been teammates with.
Uh-oh. Are you there, Abdullah?
From can you hear?
Yeah, now we can hear.
Can you still hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me know if you can't hear me.
No, you're good.
Okay,
Oh.
I was just saying. I mean, some of the Spain players.
Did we just get a glimpse of your face?
We lost him, but also
Wait. Can we hold him? No,
Just lift him
make
up.
it straight. Make it straight. Yeah, we're holding Abdullah.
There's Abdullah, who has dropped. I think he just got in his car, so that's very understandable. But always
All right.
great to hear from him, and also
Wonderful news, and it's actually interesting to understand that a lot. Did I cut you off? I'm sorry.
It's fine. Carry on. I'll get back to my point.
Were you going to say something important?
I'll get back to my point. Carry on.
Okay. Well, I was going to say that it's interesting that a lot of people are calling Qatar home field advantage for Morocco because it's Arab. It's not like Morocco is closer to Qatar than any other country.
So far away. It's like a 9-hour flight.
But that's actually very interesting that everybody's calling it home field advantage. And the actual reality is that it probably is. At the same time that everyone has discarded and written off this common denominator in the Arab world, whether it's nationalism, but it's probably not nationalism. It's probably something a little deeper that binds a lot of people in the region together. And this, I think, will be something that will be discussed in classrooms. I wanted to ask Abdullah, but what do you think? You think?
No, absolutely. I think, when I was in Qatar last week, I met up with Abdullah and we were talking about this, even how, now that it's in the Middle East and there's this public space available, there's so many shows of solidarity for Palestine. Every time, not just every time an Arab team wins. I mean, we've seen it from members of the England team as well, yelling "Free Palestine" while on live TV with an Israeli reporter. So I think it's been really interesting to see, and it will continue to unfold in a really interesting way. And I think you're right to say it's a little bit more than just nationalism. I don't know. I think people have been skeptical about this World Cup since it was announced, and I think that there's a little bit of something to prove, but also a little bit of something to celebrate too. Of hey, he's back.
We're joined by Abdullah. Don't forget to readdress your point in a bit.
Yes, Abdullah, are you with us?
Afdallah?
Yeah, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes,
yes, we can.
Crystal clear.
We were just saying
Okay.
right after you left that we are wondering, and I am wondering, if this matter will be discussed in classrooms. Basically, the idea that even though this is being called home field advantage for a country like Morocco, which is not Qatari and not closer than many European countries, at the same time that so many people have written off those binding cultural connections in the Arab world, not to say not Arab nationalism, but do you think this is something that will actually make its way into the classroom as some sort of indicator of the very deep, strongly knit connections across the region, or do you think that's...
Especially if, before you answer, Abdullah, if I may, the fact that you're at Georgetown Qatar and the Education City campuses are not in session right now. You ended your semester early, so it will be interesting to see if upon the return of students, if this is still something that's going to be talked about and how it's going to be brought into the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely expect it to. I think, for one thing, it's something that's being observed pretty closely, I think, by people who are both watching the region generally, but also who are interested in these particular questions that you've all raised. I think there is something to be said, I think, about the kind of battle of narratives and who gets to control how an event like this gets to be remembered and the kinds of legacies that come from it. I mean, for me, one of the interesting things is seeing the massive shift between, opening night, that kind of, the stage in which you had all of the different, the rulers of these various regimes all kind of there on stage together, everyone trying to kind of, exploit and milk this moment for their own particular ends. You had obviously Mohammed bin Salman and Sisi and Erdogan, and then later, of course, Mohammed bin Zayed, I think, made his first appearance here since the blockade. And yet all of that has been completely overshadowed and erased by a kind of a totally different and perhaps even opposing popular narrative that has come across from, largely through obviously social media posts, but even some of the general media and the way that fans are finding these openings to express themselves, to express certain kinds of solidarities, not the least of which, of course, is everything we've been hearing and reading about the presence of Palestine at every single match here, in every fan zone and every metro stop. I mean, it's been something that we haven't seen the likes of it, probably going back multiple decades, at least in terms of this visible, and in a way that is not being kind of commandeered or co-opted in any kind of significant way. So I think there's a lot here that still has to be unpacked. And so I would say, bring it into the classroom as a form of asking the question, and especially obviously for students in this region, many of whom, despite the fact that they're on break, have decided to stick around and are attending the matches in big numbers. They're pursuing some of their own activism at some of these games. So they're having the conversations kind of on the sidelines, on the margins of these events. So there is kind of an active participation on behalf of communities of teachers, scholars, as well as students throughout these games, which I hope will continue very, very well into the future.
Thanks, Abdullah. Before we let you go, we just put up the basically the announcement for our last episode of Real Football Podcast, which was titled "A Week Before the Whistle," your final 2022 Qatar World Cup preview. What do you think the focus will be on the next episode of Real Football Podcast, on which we would definitely want you on?
Yeah, I mean, I'll obviously leave that up to you and Matt as our kind of co-directors of the program. But obviously, I would love to see a continuation of this conversation that we just had, thinking about legacies for this region, thinking about the future performance. I mean, one thought I had in my mind watching Morocco's performance tonight is that if this was just 10 years ago, how many of these Moroccan players would have declared for a European team? Hakimi would be playing for Spain tonight, probably. Right, like there's power, I think, in the idea that the more success that these teams have, the more likely we are to see younger talents declare for their home countries, as opposed to kind of an adopted European nation where they might assume they're more likely to have a bigger stage or more success. And so I think that's just among the many different kind of conversations I'd like to see us pursue.
Wonderful. And we did have discussions, internal as well as on the podcast, regarding the importance of B teams these days, especially the past 15 years or so. But there's been an exponential rise in the strength of B teams as a function of them or many of their players being part of the top league teams around the world. So we did emphasize this, and I must say that I was following this statistically also, and that is a breakthrough that represents basically is a major indicator of that meteoric rise of B teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I look forward to you bringing that up more with the statistics and, seeing the extent to which we can kind of track some of these trajectories more going forward. I mean, I think, Tunisia may be the unluckiest team in this tournament. I mean, when we really look back, obviously they were eliminated in the end, but their three performances were quite strong.
Excellent. Yeah.
And we could be having a very different conversation now if had just, one thing broken their way.
And okay, so I'll just end by reinforcing this point on statistics, which is there's been also perhaps the largest number of remarkable upsets this World Cup, right? With Germany losing, France losing, Brazil losing,
Argentina.
and Croatia losing, Argentina losing to B teams, and many
Belgium.
of these Belgium losing. Belgium. My brother-in-law tells me it's Belgium, not Belgium, as I've been saying for like 45 years. All right, so that's really impressive. We should probably highlight that with scores next time we have a conversation on Real Football Podcast. Abdullah, you are a gem for foregoing the festivities and calling us. We really appreciate this.
Happy to do it, and I'll be sending some videos along too. So
Woohoo!
you can see those.
Yes, and we used a photo of yours from the internet. I hope it's okay.
It's an acceptable photo, I think. It's your professional headshot.
Yeah.
Okay, it's probably very old, but I'll take it.
No, you're getting younger and younger. Okay, Habibi, thank you so much.
Good to see you.
Yeah, you
Have
too.
fun.
Thanks
Enjoy.
so
Bye,
much.
Abdullah.
Enjoy, Abdullah. Salam.
Okay, now getting back to... Thank you. Thank you. I was his student, so I'm trying to embody his intellect. Okay. Okay. Finally, we understand this is a very long episode. So we will wrap up and say that we have a new essential readings collection.
Right. I revealed that it's you. You had something to say, by the way, since nobody's watching.
What?
You had something to say when
What
I cut
did I
you
have
off.
to say?
When I cut you off, you said, I'll say it later.
Oh, it was about Palestine. And it was about Palestinian solidarity. I brought it up after
Okay,
you finished your
awesome.
point. Yeah. Okay, anyhow, back to the Middle East Studies Pedagogy Initiative and the many things they've produced this month, which is finally they have produced a new essential readings collection.
Compiled by Aya Nassar, titled Cities and Materiality, the Making and Unmaking of Urban Space in the Middle East and North Africa. Essential Readings
Nope.
also had a
That you just said it.
really nice output, but we will go on to talk a little bit about
That's what we just
a special new text out now segment. Tadween Publishing is excited to announce the near release.
The actual release.
because this was written
We actually already
before,
covered this, but
of The Search for Power, which we just heard from Tanya Al-Khouri addressing this fantastic work of art and intellect that we're very proud of. At this point, I will leave it to MK because she's scrolling.
I'm scrolling because we already discussed all of these things. Okay, so
and
if
I
it wasn't
gearing for like jumping in and then you scroll.
if it wasn't evident, it is just Bassem and I in the studio today. And I think we're doing okay, but there are certainly some consequences to our actions or lack thereof. And one of those is that we're a little bit all over the place. And that's okay.
No, that's totally fine, especially that we had this issue with the World Cup and then we had this kind of unfortunate incident where we were booted. But please go ahead.
We will leave you with some must-read articles, as in articles that you really must read. As usual, I just said that. Wow, Mary Kate pulled together. Okay. In a piece titled Resolving UNRWA's Financial Crisis is Possible with a Fundamental Change in Approach in Vision, co-authored by Francesca Albanese, Jalal Al-Husseini, Diana Butu, Michael Dumper, R.D. This is many authors. R.D. Imsais, Damim Lilly, and Lex Teckenberg, and not myself, who's supposed to say this? Muin. And Muin Rabbani, in which In the piece, they argue for a much needed shift in UNRWA's work. The authors advocate that this shift should be from providing support for humanitarian needs and basic humanitarian development to a comprehensive response on all aspects of the Palestinian refugee crisis, including a more expanded focus on protection and the pursuit of durable solutions.
In a piece titled Growing Utopian Crack,
That's not even the full title. Growing Utopian Crack, 10 Years of Rojava Revolution.
Jan Yassin Sunka offers reflections on the decades since the Rojava Revolution in the Kurdish areas of northern and northeastern Syria. Sunka argues that the utopianism of the revolution results from historical exigency, which in turn bridges the gap between the realness of revolution and the utopian freedoms that it promises.
I'm going to gaslight Mohammed for a second and say I have no recollection of this particular title. I recall the second part, but the first part of this title, so maybe he made it up.
Yeah.
Who's to say?
Let's go.
Anyhow, that brings us to the end of our show covering the month of knowledge production in November. We hope that you enjoyed today's episode. Please be sure to check out the episode digest on Jadalia later this week for links to all of the content we covered today.
Thank you, everyone. We'd like to thank our guests and viewers, and apologies for any of the glitches, notably the fact that you are not
watching
listening live. But you will be watching this on video, everybody in droves. We will see you next month for episode 3.5 in January 2023, where the show will take on a bit of a different dimension that is more conversational, more laid back, even more laid back than this, but it will also feature other co-hosts.
But Sam is bored of just me.
No, Mary Kate is probably...
Kate?
MK.
Whoa.
Ooh, sorry. We will be covering the month of December next month as usual. See you all soon.
See you soon.
Thank you so much.
Go Morocco.
Oh, we're on that. All right, go Morocco.
Viva Morocco.